To whom it may concern. I feel the need to put into words something that has been weighing on me for quite some time. My girlfriend, Sarah, often had her sister Natalie over, and whenever the two of them were together, things seemed to spiral. They spoke in a kind of shorthand that shut me out completely. Hours would pass with them locked away in our bedroom, experimenting with outfits, accessories, and makeup, an entire world I neither understood nor felt comfortable being around. Living in a cramped one-bedroom apartment meant there was nowhere to truly escape. I tried to be friendly when Natalie arrived, exchanging a few polite words before moving to whichever room they weren't occupying at the time. But they constantly shifted spaces, and no matter where I went, I always felt like an outsider in my own home. Frustration built quickly. Disagreements became frequent. Standing my ground with Sarah alone was difficult enough, but when Natalie joined in, everything escalated. It felt like I was always outnumbered. Things only became more tense when their mother, Serena, came to visit. Sarah would accuse me of being controlling or of resenting her family, even though I rarely said anything at all. Natalie and Serena didn't need to speak, their looks of quiet judgment made their opinions painfully clear. That said, there were moments that seemed lighter on the surface. Every so often, they would pull me into whatever they were doing. I mistook those moments for genuine inclusion, but more often than not, they turned into jokes at my expense. They teased me about my appearance, making playful but pointed remarks about my body that I tried to laugh off, even when they struck a nerve. I had never given much thought to my looks before that, but constant comments have a way of getting under your skin. Natalie even joked that my name, Pat, sounded more suited to a woman, suggesting my parents must have secretly wanted a daughter. It was said lightly, but it lingered. One day, tired of being the easy target, I tried to push back with a joke of my own, implying that I might outgrow her in ways she wouldn't expect. I meant it as harmless banter. Instead, it backfired instantly. Natalie shot back with a remark that crossed a line, and I immediately wished I had kept quiet. From there, the teasing only intensified. She went on about how I wouldn't last a day dealing with the everyday inconveniences women put up with, turning simple things into a list of imagined challenges meant to embarrass me further. I felt exposed and foolish, stuck listening to it all. I finally snapped back with a comment dismissing the whole issue as overblown, saying people made too much fuss over things that couldn't possibly be that difficult. The moment the words left my mouth, I knew I'd made things worse. When you're constantly poked at and renamed into someone you don't recognize, restraint doesn't always come easily. That one reaction opened the door to far more than I expected. What followed felt inevitable in hindsight. With Sarah and Serena urging it on, Natalie decided to prove her point. They turned it into a kind of demonstration, dressing me up in borrowed clothes meant to show how easy it all was. What surprised me most wasn't the situation itself, but how ordinary it felt once it started. The fabrics were soft, the fit carefully adjusted, and despite myself, I noticed how different my reflection looked: neater, styled, unfamiliar. Their reactions were immediate, and my embarrassment deepened when Sarah brought out a fitted top and insisted it suited me perfectly. Accessories followed, chosen with far too much enthusiasm. Looking at myself in the mirror, I barely recognized the person staring back, and Natalie's earlier joke about my name echoed uncomfortably in my mind. Even my usual clothes were swapped out piece by piece for things that matched the look they were building. Everything was adjusted and smoothed until it all somehow worked. Natalie corrected my posture, showing me how to stand and move differently, pointing out how it changed my silhouette. Hearing my body described in those terms felt surreal. What shocked me most was how quickly the transformation happened, and how effortless it seemed. The layers, the textures, the way everything fit together, it all felt strangely natural once it was in place. Shoes were added last, and though they felt unfamiliar, I stood there without protesting. They weren't finished. Grooming came next, followed by makeup applied with careful precision. Each step took time, far more than I'd imagined, and I sat there quietly as brushes moved across my face and eyes. When it was finally done, I caught another glimpse of myself and struggled to connect that image with who I thought I was. For the first time, I found myself wondering how much effort went into this kind of preparation every day and how anyone managed it without complaint. My change carried on without pause, feeling less like a moment and more like an inescapable dream. Sarah reached into her bag and pulled out a tube of lipstick. I watched as she twisted it open, the vivid color rising into view. She asked me to stay still, then carefully traced it along my upper lip and then the lower. When she was done, I pressed my lips together, spreading the color evenly. The sensation surprised me. It was smooth and comforting, and before I realized it, I kept repeating the motion, distracted by how different it felt. But that was only another step, not the end. A soft mist settled against both sides of my neck, cool at first, then warming as it slid downward. Without thinking, I touched my wrists to it, then raised my hands to my face, breathing in the unfamiliar scent. Only afterward did I register the quiet laughter around me. Natalie told me to take a seat so they could work on my nails. I did as instructed, smoothing my skirt beneath me as I sat, my hands settling naturally on the table. The ease of it startled me. I didn't remember deciding to move that way, it just happened. It felt as though whatever part of me had once resisted was slowly fading. I couldn't understand how a few changes in clothing and presentation could have such an effect. While Natalie and Serena focused on my nails, Sarah returned with a long blonde wig she sometimes wore herself. I watched closely as she brushed it out, each stroke neat and careful. There was a strange sense of anticipation, as though the last connection to who I had been was about to slip away. My nails were still drying when she gently set the wig in place, adjusting it until she was satisfied, before guiding me toward the full-length mirror. I stood frozen, staring at the reflection. The person looking back at me felt unreal. Patrick would never have recognized her, but Patricia did. She tilted her head, letting the hair fall over her shoulders, turned slowly to watch it move, then lifted the skirt slightly and spun, studying every angle. Standing tall in heels, she admired her legs. And then, without warning, tears welled up. The days that followed blurred together. At first, Sarah assumed my tears meant I wanted everything to stop and tried to soften the situation, suggesting it could end by the evening. Natalie dismissed that idea immediately, remarking that she had expected I wouldn't last even a full day dealing with what women managed daily. Serena agreed, warning Sarah that backing down now would only make things harder later and that limits had to be set. I carefully wiped at my eyes, mindful of the makeup. I didn't fully understand why I was crying, but I knew I wasn't ready to let go of the experience just yet. I said I could manage, that I would see it through. The problem was that no one had ever said how long through actually was. What began as a simple challenge had grown into something much bigger, with no clear ending. I didn't dare ask when it would stop, afraid of drawing more attention to myself. Part of me wondered if Natalie would ever let me return to anything familiar, given how little she liked me. I felt cornered, yet oddly calm, even while facing the possibility that this might continue indefinitely. Patricia, on the other hand, seemed perfectly at ease. She knew how to move, how to sit, how to walk in heels as though it were second nature. It felt like another presence had quietly taken over. The others interpreted my composure as courage, which made it easier to go along without embarrassment. By nightfall, I was grateful to step out of the heels, my feet sore despite everything. Sarah mentioned that what I'd been wearing had helped more than I realized, and when I slipped into a pair of soft slippers, the relief was immediate and comforting. There was a twinge of sadness when it was time to change out of the outfit I'd grown attached to. Ironically, the one item I wanted off most wasn't allowed to come off at all. Sarah insisted it was necessary and refused to discuss it further. I stopped arguing, knowing it would only escalate things. She snapped that I needed to stop complaining, reminding me that I had brought this on myself and should face it without backing down. I went along with it, knowing resistance would only lead to more ridicule. Everything was happening too fast, and despite everything, I needed her reassurance. Removing the makeup later felt strangely disappointing. Without it, and without the wig, my reflection seemed dull and incomplete. The one thing that lingered was the light, pleasant scent I'd been wearing, still there when I woke the next morning. For a moment I thought it was Sarah nearby, until the feel of unfamiliar fabric reminded me of the previous day. By Monday, it was clear this wasn't just temporary. I had to call in sick because the alternative was going in exactly as I was. As the week went on, I slowly adjusted to the routine. With Sarah gone during the day, the household responsibilities fell to me, and life began to settle into a new, unexpected pattern. I didn't really mind waking up to a checklist of chores each morning. In fact, having something structured to do helped pass the time. What felt unusual was that every task revolved around women's clothing, washing it, pressing it, folding it away. Spending so much time handling those garments made me notice details I'd never paid attention to before: the soft fabrics, the variety of colors, the thoughtful designs. More than once, curiosity got the better of me, and I tried on a few pieces when I was sure no one was around. The following Monday, Sarah called my workplace again. This time she told them my mother had fallen ill and that I'd traveled to Australia to be with her. That was when it really sank in: this wasn't ending soon. Sarah clearly expected me to continue living this way for at least another week, maybe longer. Natalie made regular appearances every few days, determined that Patricia experience every aspect of this new life. Once I'd adjusted to skirts that fell around my knees, she introduced much shorter ones that barely covered anything. I felt incredibly exposed and moved carefully, worried I might reveal more than intended. Over time, though, I adapted. Keeping my legs close together became second nature, and when I sat down, I crossed them without thinking. As I grew more confident walking in heels, I even noticed a subtle sway in my hips that hadn't been there before. The first time Sarah saw me in one of those skirts, she decided my legs needed extra attention. She took me into the bathroom and showed me how to shave properly, adding my underarms to the lesson. At first the sensation was strange, almost slippery, but the smoothness afterward was impossible to ignore. I found myself keeping my legs together just to feel them brush against each other. Sitting with my hands neatly folded in my lap and my legs crossed, it became hard not to notice how differently I was carrying myself. What surprised me most was how these habits stayed with me, even when the clothes changed. In longer, flowing skirts, I still sat with my knees close, my hands occasionally smoothing over my legs. I enjoyed how the fabric moved when I walked and sometimes caught myself lifting the hem slightly just to watch it sway. More than once, I spun around simply to see the skirt flare out. It felt like I'd crossed a line I couldn't step back over, and to my own surprise, I was fine with that. Embracing Patricia seemed to change how the others treated me. I felt more included than ever. Before long, they shortened my name to Trisha, sometimes even Trish, using it casually, like I truly belonged. Hearing those names made me smile, and I found myself looking forward to Natalie and Serena's visits, even missing them when they hadn't come by in a while. I was no longer left out of anything. Instead of disappearing into the bedroom together, they pulled me along, inviting me to join them while they tried on outfits, accessories, and makeup. Sarah and I also spent time at Natalie and Serena's place, which only expanded the wardrobe I was exposed to. I realized that my fascination had shifted. I enjoyed watching them experiment with clothes almost as much as doing it myself. It wasn't about their bodies at all, it was about the clothing itself. Mornings became strange. Catching sight of Patrick in the mirror felt jarring, and he never seemed to linger. Once he was gone, I didn't miss him. Grooming took on a new rhythm, shaping my eyebrows, tidying my face, then putting on my wig. Having long hair changed how I moved. I'd tilt my head back or sweep it aside without thinking. The gesture felt natural, even satisfying, especially with the soft clink of bracelets at my wrists. Bracelets and bangles quickly became favorites. I couldn't stop browsing them whenever I was out, and before I knew it, I'd collected far more than I ever expected. Wearing them gave my hands something to play with and made me feel lighter somehow. Necklaces had a similar effect. Whether in a store or around my neck, my fingers were drawn to them, absent-mindedly tracing the chain. I also noticed I folded my arms more often, partly because so many outfits lacked pockets. Crossing my arms beneath my chest became oddly comforting, especially since my shape had changed from wearing bras regularly. At some point, though I couldn't say exactly when, my old clothes vanished. I didn't even remember them being taken away. All I knew was that dresses, skirts, tops, and women's undergarments kept filling my drawers until nothing from my former wardrobe remained. Eventually, women's trousers appeared too. I never imagined that wearing pants could feel so different. The cuts and fabrics weren't like anything I'd worn before. Even simple jeans seemed to change my silhouette, making my hips look fuller and my thighs more defined. Paired with shorter tops, they took on an entirely new character. What stood out most was the constant awareness of what I was wearing underneath. Even the simplest outfit reminded me of that difference. Shirts and tops might look ordinary, but fastening them the opposite way and knowing what I had on beneath them was a constant reminder of how far I'd gone. Feeling the bra there, seeing its outline, adjusting to its presence reshaped how I thought about myself. Wearing women's clothing from the inside out made the transformation feel complete, as though I was no longer pretending at all. The pants felt completely different once I started wearing them with high heels. The effect was even stronger when they were paired with a cropped top that revealed my midsection and the small stud in my navel. The girls had talked me into getting it at the same time as my ear piercings. I loved changing up my earrings, especially the longer ones that moved every time I turned my head. What surprised me most was how something so small and subtle could make me feel unmistakably feminine, all from a place I'd never even thought about before. There was a time when I would have panicked about how I'd explain all of this to my coworkers. But as weeks stretched into months and Sarah's carefully constructed story kept shifting, it became obvious that neither she, Natalie, nor Serena had any intention of letting me return to work, at least not as the person I used to be. First, the explanation was that my mother had passed away and I needed to stay away for the funeral. Then it became that my father was unwell and couldn't be left alone in such a fragile state. Finally, the message changed completely. Pat had decided to stay away permanently, so my employer should treat it as a resignation, release his final pay, and hand over anything he'd left behind to his cousin, Patricia. Hearing the word permanently sent a chill through me. Resignation and final pay triggered outright panic. But what truly unsettled me was the casual assumption that Patricia would come by herself. Surely Sarah didn't expect me to face my old co-workers like that. That thought alone felt unbearable. The phrase "anything of his" that still remains echoed in my mind. That was when it hit me, I hadn't seen a single thing that belonged to Pat in weeks. I couldn't remember when they'd disappeared, only that they were gone. That visit wasn't just about collecting a paycheck, it was about gathering the last traces of a life I no longer seemed to have. The day Trisha went in was unforgettable. I was terrified, but Sarah made it clear I had no choice. What shocked me most was that no one recognized me. Not one of my former co-workers, aside from a forklift driver who made a couple of awkward, misplaced gestures, seemed to connect me to the person I used to be. Sarah had joked that even my own mother wouldn't recognize me now, but standing there, I finally understood how true that was. By then, my figure had changed enough that even my clothes fit differently, and my walk had adapted without conscious effort. My hips felt fuller, my posture softer, and even my voice, still deeper than most women's, had taken on a confidence I'd never had before. Living as Trisha no longer felt forced, it felt natural. At home, I'd settled into a steady routine of cooking, cleaning, shopping, and managing the household. Strangely, I began to miss work, not the job itself, but the interaction, the sense of being around other people. Sarah's world felt vibrant and full, and I realized that if I ever worked again, it would have to be in a completely different space from the one I'd known. A few weeks later, my birthday arrived, and it felt surreal. Every gift I opened reflected who I had become. Serena gave me a beautiful floral dress. Natalie's present made me blush, a carefully chosen set of delicate clothing meant to be worn underneath. Sarah's gift caught me completely off guard, a very personal item she insisted every woman should have. Before I could even respond, the lights went out, a cake appeared, and candles lit up the words "Happy Birthday, Patricia." As they sang, I closed my eyes, made a wish, and blew out the candles, feeling oddly peaceful. I'd always believed that wishes only worked if you kept them secret. Sarah had a different idea. As the smoke curled upward, she said that if she could guess my wish, it would be sealed for good. She didn't even finish the sentence. The warmth rushing to my face gave me away instantly. Sarah and Natalie reacted with delighted excitement, and even Serena looked quietly satisfied. Serena encouraged me to say it out loud, telling me I was strong enough. With everyone urging me on, I finally gave in and admitted the truth. I wanted this life to continue. I wanted to remain Patricia. They made me repeat it, again and again, louder each time, until it turned into a playful chant that filled the room. As we moved around together, laughing and singing, something finally clicked. I realized then why everything had always fit so perfectly, especially the shoes. None of this had been accidental. I hadn't just stumbled into this life, it had been planned. And the plan hadn't even started with Natalie. It had been Sarah's idea. Frustrated by my behavior and my attitude toward her family, she had decided to force me to understand their world by making me live in it. What stunned me even more was learning that she had quietly altered my routine long before I ever noticed the changes. By the time I wore my first bra, those changes had already been underway for a long time. That explained why my body had responded the way it did. The greatest shock, though, came afterward. Even once I understood that there was no simple way back, I chose not to undo it. Instead, I decided to continue forward, fully committing to the life I had grown to love. What had begun as resistance had transformed into desire. Since that first moment, my outlook had shifted completely. I no longer felt like I was being dragged along. I wanted to see it through, to fully become the person I had discovered myself to be. When I finally told my parents, I learned something unexpected. They had dressed me as a girl when I was very young, and they had chosen my name because it worked either way. Where I might once have felt resentment, I now felt gratitude for Natalie's honesty, for Sarah's determination, and for the path that had led me here. When my parents accepted me without hesitation, I cried harder than I ever had before, overwhelmed with relief and happiness. And that's when the final realization settled in. The real tragedy wasn't what I'd lost, it was how long it had taken to become who I truly was. At last, that imbalance had been corrected, and everything felt right. Don't forget to join me on Patreon for exclusive content,